guys! Today I wanted to do a couple of mini book reviews. I haven't done a book review in a while, and I've read a couple of books, some of which I think are going to have longer videos, but others I think I just want to talk about a little bit, and they don't really have enough content for me to do in its own video. None of which I have with me. One was an audiobook. One was a library book that I've had to return, and one was one that I borrowed from work that I had to return. The first one was The Girl with All the Gifts. Now, I read this during the booktubeathon, and it was actually the first one I picked up and the first one that I finished, although it took me about a week to finish it. That isn't to say that I didn't enjoy it. I do think that after it was all said and done, I did like it quite a bit. The problem I had with it was that, for the most part, while it did try and turn a lot of tropes of the genre on its head, it didn't do it in an interesting way. It just sort of seemed to take one character and put it into the other character's shoes, so to speak. So we have the one who's really trying to care for people, and we have the one who's sort of stiff and just all about, you know, this is what needs to happen, and it just seems like they flip-flopped. At the same time, I think that what it was saying was interesting. The ending really shocked me, and I'm not going to talk about it because I'm not going to do any spoils in this, but I do think that the ending for the book made the rest of the book, which was a little bit harder for me to get through, worth it. I think I rated the book 4 stars. It was, at the end, worth it. I do think that as a YA book, it was really well written, and there wasn't really any of the usual YA tropes in it, which is great if you're looking for books that are YA but don't have any of those love triangles, etc. But then again, it's not one of the most memorable books that I have read this year, so it will probably be one that I forget quite quickly. The second book will definitely be getting a longer video, and that is Futuristic Violence in Fancy Suits. Taylor and I are going to be discussing this because we are both avid lovers of David Wong's work. We both have talked on and on about how we love John Dies at the End, and this book is full of spiders. This was the first time that we're reading something by David Wong that wasn't from his own perspective, or the character David Wong's perspective. It was interesting to read a David Wong book from the perspective of a woman. Taylor felt for sure that the pacing was wrong. Because I listened to it as an audiobook, I was able to listen to it at 3 times speed, and I think that whenever I do that, pacing is the one thing I can't talk about, because the pacing is obviously 3 times faster, and at that speed it was perfectly fine for me. The other thing being that I read it in like 2 or 3 sittings, so I read it fairly quickly. I didn't have to, you know, feel like I was wading through similar things going on and on. It is a lot of talking and a lot of planning, trying and failing, but I think in a way that's what it was trying to be. It was trying to be this sort of singular person's journey, having to keep doing the same thing. There were characters of David Wong's that are always great, and as there were in this, always great. His dialogue is always super on point. The story itself was pretty interesting, and it sort of left itself open to a sequel, which I would be interested in seeing where that's going. But again, it wasn't my favorite of his books. I think This Book is Full of Spiders is still my favorite of his books. But again, I enjoyed it. It was good. If you like humor, this one isn't as horror-y as the other two. It's more science fiction, action, adventure-y. I'm a fan of David Wong's work because he is able to mix genres in a way that is really quite interesting. The last book that I wanted to talk about is Homegoing by Ya Jesse, and I finished this in one sitting. I read the whole thing in one sitting, 300 pages. I did it yesterday, so that one's the one that's freshest in my mind, and I was blown away by it. Honestly, I am so surprised that I liked it as much as I did. I was worried that it was going to be overhyped. The publishers have been pushing it super hard. It was basically brought up to be what I'm going to say is like shoo-ins for awards. Like it was basically had all of this hype around it that I was like skeptical of whether it could actually do what it had set out to do. And surprisingly, it did. It was able to talk about slavery and the effects of slavery both in America and in Africa through one family without feeling like it was trying to do everything. It somehow felt like it was able to touch on everything without being too much. And while I realized that it wasn't able to tell every story, I think that it told a lot of very important stories, and if it had tried to do more, it wouldn't have been as successful. I definitely think this is a book that high schoolers should probably read because it discusses some of the issues that we don't discuss here in America, especially the idea of the systemic racism that is still happening today, that is hidden and very much just sort of subtle in the back of everyone's minds. If you don't live in a community where racism is prevalent, you're not going to know it's still there. But the reason you don't know it's there is because there probably isn't a lot of people of color. Like my hometown, we had one Asian girl who was adopted by white parents, and I think 3 Hispanic kids who came from the poor part of the town that was almost touching the poorer city next to our town. And they sort of stuck to themselves, so nobody really had issues. But at the same time, the reason they stuck to themselves is probably because the rich, upper middle class white kids didn't really want to let them in, and they were not the same. I don't know. There's all of these thoughts about systemic racism and endemic racism that I have, and I learned a lot about it in classes. I took a biology of poverty class, and I took a lot of classes discussing sort of the social injustices that we have in our country, be it the incarceration rates, be it the food deserts and weird segregation that's sort of created through neighborhoods. Like you can go neighborhood to neighborhood in cities like the one that I'm living in now and see where the rich people who are predominantly white live, and see where the poor people who are predominantly African American or Hispanic or other minorities live. And it's sort of alarming to realize that we're still living in this state. So that was a weird rant. I appear to be going on to lots of rants at the end of my videos. Not helpful. I appear to be wanting to say a lot of things about social injustice. Last time it was about Native Americans. This time it is about African Americans. In any case, Homegoing was really great. I think that if you would like a better review of it, because this was really quick and mostly a rant, go watch the Poptimist's video on it, because he endlessly surprises me with how great he is in his reviews and always makes me want to read the books that he's picking up. So if you haven't subscribed to him, go do that. I'm sure you have, because he's much more popular than I am, but I don't know if you saw that particular video. It was good. Homegoing is worth it. Of the 3 that I talked about today, I think they are all very good representations of their respective genres. We have an African American book that is very much literary fiction and very well constructed and well executed. We have a science fiction book that is funny and exciting and just action adventure packed, and then we have a young adult book that verges on dystopian that says interesting things about politics and what it means to be a young person growing up and how you sort of view yourself versus the older generation. So yeah, there were those 3 books. I think they were all very good respective representations of their genre, and of the 3, definitely read Homegoing. Out of all of them, read that one. But yes, that's all I have for you guys today. I will talk to you again soon.